What's going on, podcast listeners? My name is Michael Chernow. I am a restaurateur and lifestyle entrepreneur, and I am truly obsessed with living a life better than yesterday through wellness, fitness, and good vibes. I've always wondered if the drive to succeed is something we are born with, or if it's something that is made over time through grit, drive, and perseverance. I get to answer that question exactly, and the goal of this podcast is to talk with people that have absolutely crushed it in life and have inspired me to do the same. This is Born or Made. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Born or Made podcast. I am incredibly excited to have a guest on the show today who inspires me every single day throughout the day, especially first thing in the morning when I look at my my Whoop app. I've got the CEO and founder of Whoop, a company that has truly made a massive impact on my life over the last 2.5 years. His name is Ahmed. He is the founder of the company. He is also, he was named Fortune 40 under 40 in health on the healthcare list. He is 2020 Fast Company's named most innovative company in wellness. The dude is killing it. He is truly has been working on a business for the last 10 years that has just really opened up so many doors for so many people in the world of human optimization. Will, welcome to the show.
Michael, thanks for having me. Thank you for that intro.
Yeah, man, I just, I've got so many questions for you. You really do. You're one of the, I've had a lot of people on this show. I think this is probably like the 40th or 40 something episode. But I will say that there are people that have inspired me from afar. And then there are people that inspire me truly like every waking hour of my day. And you're one of them. What you've done is, and I don't think I'm unique here. You've convinced me that optimization is achieved through balance. It's not achieved through being in overdrive constantly. And I really needed to understand that and learn that. So I've got an enormous amount of questions for you, but I'd love for you to just give us a quick intro, just so we really know who you are from your mouth, not mine.
Yeah, thank you. I got into this whole space of health and wellness and fitness because I was, throughout most of my life, I was into sports and exercise, and and I played a bunch of different sports growing up. I ended up playing squash at Harvard, which is like a cardiovascular sport for people who don't know it well. And I was someone who used to overtrain as an athlete. And so I got very interested in what can you do to train optimally and how can you prevent overtraining. And there were other athletes I was around like who would undertrain or misinterpret fitness peaks or get injured. So in general, I just felt that, training and playing a sport at Harvard was probably the least intelligent thing I was doing there. And it felt like it was frozen in time in terms of how we as humans were thinking about our bodies. And so I got very interested in physiology. This would have been around 2010. I was maybe a sophomore at Harvard, 19, 20 years old, and I just started reading physiology papers. And by the time I graduated, I'd read, maybe 500 medical papers, and I had written a paper myself around continuously understanding the human body. And I didn't know over the course of my time as an undergraduate that I was going to start Whoop or start a company for that matter. But I became so obsessed with this question of how can you improve health? How can you understand your body? That it almost was like I didn't have a choice. This company was going to start itself and pull me along with it. And so by my senior fall, I committed to starting Whoop. And I spent most of that year looking for talented people to build the business with. And I met two, brilliant guys by the time I graduated, John Capilupo and Aurelian Nicolai. who became co-founders of mine in building the business. We started working out of the Harvard Innovation Lab. This would have been summer of 2012. And really the very early stages of the company were, can we build this technology? Can we build something that can really accurately understand your body? And to just go back in time to 2012 for a second, the polar chest strap, the heart rate monitor you wear around your body, that was kind of one of the more popular wearables. And I thought that thing was ridiculous because it was so uncomfortable, and I can't even imagine women wearing it, let alone men. And then there were products, very early stage products like Fitbit at the time, which had just sort of started introducing this idea of activity tracking and step counting. Broadly speaking, though, I didn't think there was anything that could tell an athlete how to understand their bodies, let alone be able to provide deep, medical insight or real information that could be used to understand your physiology. And again, a lot of this was based on the research that I had done as a student. So those first couple of years were pretty hardcore technology development. And we can kind of touch on any cycle of the company, but over the last 9 years now, I've been building this business, and now we've got about 350 employees. We've raised 200 million in capital. The business has a big valuation. We've got a lot of customers, so it's a more mature business.
That whole entire walkthrough of that is interesting for me, only because I guess I beg the question when I hear that, why was it that you were so inspired to understand how the human body can better, especially athletes, better optimize itself? Like what made you think that we weren't doing it right? Or what made you think that we could be doing it better?
Well, I think like over the course of your life, you have these few kind of singular moments where you feel like you notice something that a lot of people don't, or a lot of people disagree with. And when your conviction is really high in those moments, you have a big opportunity. That's not to say you're necessarily going to be right, but you have a big opportunity. And I realized that the reason I was overtraining as an athlete was not the 2 or 3 hours I was training. It was also just all the chaos of my life outside of being, an athlete for 3 hours a day. It was staying up late. It was going out. It was whatever.
Finishing top 10% of your class at Harvard.
Well, look, it was a lot of things. And so it made me just realize that probably the way to understand your body wasn't just this singular moment in time, but it was more of a 24/7 picture. And I realized this really strongly, or I felt that really strongly. And when I met with coaches, and I asked them what technology they'd want, they were very exercise focused. They wanted more information on exercise. How can we measure muscle development? How can we get better video analysis? Can you measure sweat? And I thought that was an overrated amount of information related to exercise. They already knew a lot about what you were doing when you were exercising. And when I asked them what their problems were, they always came back to athlete availability and injury prevention. And so I thought there was a mismatch between what they were asking for and what they were trying to solve for. And this is another insight I would say that you develop as an entrepreneur. Your customers or potential customers tend to be very good at describing their problems. They're not necessarily good at describing what the solutions are to those problems, right? So it's really important as an entrepreneur to listen very carefully to your customers' problems and then form what you believe is the right solution to those problems. Again, going back to 2012, that was a time frame where it felt like the pendulum of exercise versus rest had kind of maxed out on the exercise side. people were talking about going from 2-a-days to 3-a-days, and so I just really strongly believe that actually the next story in sports and even the next story in health was going to be around sleep and recovery. And at the time, that was actually a controversial point of view. And I just believed it so deeply. And all this physiology research was demonstrating it, that, again, it didn't feel like I had much of a choice to start Whoop. It was just so obvious to me.
Can I ask a question? So, the name of this podcast is called Born or Made, and it really sort of boils down to nature nurture, right? It's really trying to uncover if there is any sort of right direction or not. The fact of whether you are born with an inherent or an innate ability to get after it the way you have, right? You said that you had no choice but to create Whoop. Like, you literally were it was like a gravitational pull to do this thing and you just couldn't control it. I would say that that's a unique attribute for humanity, right? Like, not everybody is drawn to just feel like they have to go after something with such intensity, outside of like extreme people, peak athletes and the like. So can you describe, like, was there anything that was motivating you to make those decisions outside of, like, can you describe that? Do you remember a moment where you were just like, this is why I have to do this? Because I would imagine that you've had that sort of drive from as early as you can remember, right? I mean, is this something that you developed over time, or were you born with this ability to just like fixate and go?
I think I've always been hard driving in my life. And I would get fixated on things, a sport, a specific class, but it often always, I think, looking back on it, it had to be something I was motivated to do. Like, I had to find that passion myself. I was never that good at having someone else tell me to do something. I was a little bit stubborn in that regard, especially like, as a teenager or even younger. But the things that I independently became passionate about, I became pretty obsessed with. And but to your question, that's not to say that the things that you get obsessed with, you're naturally inclined to become good at, right? And to this whole question of born or made, I do think entrepreneurs are made over time. Like, I think there were natural inclinations for me to start Whoop. And I probably started Whoop at a younger age than most people would feel comfortable starting a business. However, I think that the process of becoming an entrepreneur is a process that a lot of people could go through that are scared to start. And go ahead.
No, you know, uh, there's been an evolution with this podcast for me, right? Initially, when I launched this podcast, I do, and I still do believe that there is a level of nature that exists amongst extraordinary people. If you really sort of strip it down, when you think about Mozart and, Whitney Houston and Stevie Wonder and Michael Jordan and, Tiger Woods, and like, there's obviously, there is some piece of nature that exists in them. And then of course they sharpen the knife as they grow. But, I guarantee Whitney Houston was born with a voice, right? That, like, she just had to understand that voice exists, and then she can grow with it. But as I've grown, the evolution of the podcast, I've also come to believe that everybody is born with something. Every human being is born with a talent, and the journey in life is to really uncover what that talent is as fast as humanly possible, and then capitalize on it, so that then you can grow and make it what you've made it. And so, when you say that, I believe every entrepreneur has there is this opportunity for everyone to potentially be an entrepreneur. Most people are just afraid to start. Is there a piece of advice that you can give for someone who's on the fence, or who potentially someone who's listening who's just never even thought about being an entrepreneur, to push them over the edge? Because if there was ever a time to be an entrepreneur, the time is now. And so, any advice
Yeah,
there?
I would start there. I mean, I think that there's never been a better time in the history of the world to be an entrepreneur. And I don't say that lightly. Like you can literally create a website and have a whole social media platform and a marketing engine and be a one-man show, right? And if you want to build something really, really ambitious that's involves atoms and bits, there's a lot of capital that's out there to do that too. There's never been more money in the venture capital industry than there ever has been before. Now, that's not to say that you're ready to start a company, but it's all to say that there's definitely an environment that is productive for it. Having said that, like I think the other thing that prevents people from starting companies or becoming entrepreneurs is this risk assessment that they make. And the risk assessment tends to be very focused on the idea or the thing that they're pursuing and whether it's going to fail. And that's a very reasonable analysis. But what's lost in that equation is actually your development as an individual. And so I thought Whoop was going to be successful when I founded it. But 7 or 8 years later, frankly, it almost went bankrupt, right? And if it had gone bankrupt, it still would not have been a mistake for me to have started Whoop 7 or 8 years earlier, because of the enormous amount that I learned about myself in that 7 or 8 years. And sure, you could say that 2 years, right? Like pick any period of time of entrepreneurial development, and it was a massive learning curve. Yeah. When you're an early founder, an early entrepreneur, and I made this mistake, you compare yourself to other well-known entrepreneurs, right? Okay, gosh, my team is 3 people. I'm trying to recruit the 4th person and they're not joining. I bet Steve Jobs never had this problem, right? Or whatever. And I think that's a really unhealthy process for a number of reasons. The first is that, you need to keep getting better, right? It's not how you compare to other people. It's whether you can keep growing and getting on this learning curve, right? And that's the most important thing over time, is that you actually, the individual, keep improving. Whether or not the business is improving, you need to keep improving as an entrepreneur. And being an entrepreneur reveals in such great transparency what you're good at and what you're not good at. The second thing is that I bet you all these famous, entrepreneurs that you read about, when they first started the company or the thing, they actually didn't know that much more than you did. And they were figuring it out too. But what they did is they got good really fast, right? They kept learning, they kept improving. And so all that's to say is that when you put yourself out there to start a business, it forces you as an individual to really reveal your strengths and your weaknesses and learn how to fill those in. And you are probably going to fail out of the gates, but in the process, you may learn so much about yourself that it'll set you up for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And again, if you look at many of the most successful entrepreneurs, the first thing or second thing or even third thing they started was a failure, but the fourth was Uber.
I couldn't agree with you anymore. I mean, my philosophy is run towards the fear. I think fear is certainly probably the biggest hurdle for most people in life. And I've learned over the years through, founding businesses and launching companies and hiring people and firing people and all that stuff that, fear is false evidence appearing real. And so you should use it as a motivator, because in actuality, it's not there to stop you; it's there to start you. And so I love the idea of just breaking through that. I want to transition a little bit, and then because I also want to get back into Whoop, because I have a bunch of questions about just Whoop in itself. But habits, I believe, are arguably the biggest catalysts to our fate. I believe habits make or break us. I believe habits define us inside and out. I could tell you right now that Whoop has ultimately helped me develop a few habits that I am so grateful for, specifically around my sleep routine, and also breathing. That are habits that I've implemented since I have started wearing the Whoop. But I would love to talk to you about your habits, and whether or not you have a morning routine or an evening routine, or if you have a list of habits, be it big or small, that you implement into your life on a daily basis consistently.
Yeah. You know, and I would frame this. So I agree with a lot of what you said about habits. The thing I would add, though, and I've spent a lot of time researching habits and thinking about habits. A big theme of Whoop is habits. You need to, one, understand what makes you optimal, and then you also need to come to terms with the fact that if you can't do anything that makes you optimal, you're still going to be optimal, right? And that's just a mindset. But I think that both of those things are important. I know a lot of executives or entrepreneurs who have built such a routine that any deviation to that routine actually really throws them off to a point where they can't perform. And so you want to balance these two things where you control everything you can control, and at the same time have the confidence that when you're not in control of any of that stuff, you can still figure it out and you can still perform. So whenever I talk about habits, I also try to frame it through the lens of it's better if you can do these things, but if you can't do these things, still have a mindset that you're going to be just fine. For me, the things that make me more optimal, the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning, hop out of bed, take a freezing cold shower, get dressed, and then meditate for 22 minutes. And I do that almost 100% of the time. I mean, maybe I've missed a day or two in the past year, but as a start to the day, that's pretty damn consistent.
Do you wake up at a specific time every day?
So one thing that Whoop really shows you in great transparency is sleep consistency, which is a phenomenon of going to bed and waking up at the same time, makes you get all kinds of benefits, including it can offset spending less time in bed. So if you're someone listening to this and you want like life hacks, one life hack is if you go to bed and wake up at the same time, you can get away with spending less time in bed or less time allocated to sleep. So when my life's a little more chaotic, that's one thing I try to optimize for. If I'm only going to be in bed for 6 hours a night, I want to make sure it's the same 6 hours every night, or 7 hours, right? I try to spend 8 hours in bed every night. I probably end up spending 7 hours in bed most nights, but the percentage of time that I'm in slow wave and Rem sleep is really high because I've just spent years figuring out what works for me.
Can you talk to me about this? I know that I'm jumping, but like you're saying it, I don't want to forget it. Rem sleep. Rem sleep is, can you talk about Rem sleep for a minute?
Yeah, so a good way for people to think about it who don't measure their sleep is if I ask you, how much sleep did you get last night? You would say, well, I went to bed at 11 and I woke up at 6, so I got 7 hours of sleep. Okay, well, what actually happens, you spent 7 hours in bed. Within that 7 hours, you spent time awake, in light sleep, in slow wave sleep, and in REM sleep, and in that order often. like your body's cycling through these different stages. And awake and light, you virtually do nothing for you, obviously. REM and slow wave and REM, all the benefits. So slow wave sleep is when your body produces about 95% of its human growth hormone. So, there's this idea that you get stronger in the gym. Well, in fact, you're breaking your muscles down in the gym. You get stronger during slow wave sleep later when your body's repairing itself. So anyone who's listening to this who's trying to get stronger or put on muscle, like, you really want to get a lot of slow wave sleep. REM sleep is when your mind is repairing. So that's for cognitive repair. That's like when you go into dream states. So for people who are listening to this who don't measure their sleep and often don't dream, you're probably not getting REM sleep, or at least enough of it. So those two periods, slow wave sleep and REM sleep, are really, really, really powerful periods of time. Now let's go back to the person who said they got 7 hours of sleep. They spent 7 hours in bed. They may have gotten 30 minutes total of slow wave sleep and REM sleep. And mind you, I've worked with some of the best athletes in the world, and you wouldn't believe what percentage of their sleep is actually that bad, where they're only getting a very small percentage of that time in bed is this optimal sleep. On the flip side, we have people who get over 5 hours of REM and slow wave sleep a night and not allocating much more than 7 hours in bed. So that just shows you the spectrum of how well you can be sleeping. And mind you, there's very small things that you can tweak in your life to dramatically improve that percentage. So a lot of people, kind of hard driving people, are like, I don't have time to get more sleep, blah, blah, blah. Well, there's certain things you can just tweak to make sure that the time that you're actually spending in bed is going to get you more REM and slow wave, because that already is just going to dramatically improve your life.
Let's go. Give it to us. Yeah, I want to know, man.
Okay, well, so there's some things that work for everyone, and then there's some things that are highly personal. Okay, so I got a caveat by saying that. Let's start with the things that tend to work for everyone. Sleep consistency tends to work for everyone. Okay, it's really, really clear that if you go to bed and wake up at a similar time every single night, it automatically makes your resting heart rate better, your heart rate variability better. We see faster rates of recovery on Whoop. One big thing that Whoop measures is recovery. And we see people have higher recoveries when they sleep more consistently. So that's one thing to think about. Another thing is what you're doing leading up to bedtime. So alcohol happens to be one of the more destructive things that you can do. Most people intuitively know, oh, I had a few drinks last night. There's that sort of little hangover. They know that that wasn't good for them. What most people underestimate is that depending on your metabolism, even just having 1 or 2 drinks can dramatically disrupt your sleep. Now, I'm not saying you may never want to drink again, but I'm just saying you want to recognize, okay, if I'm going to try to be optimal tomorrow, how do I think about this now? So alcohol is a big one. When you eat before bed, this is a little bit more personal, but in general, you want to eat more than 3 hours before getting in bed. And there's some people who can get away with eating up to an hour before bed and it doesn't affect them. But most people, if they're eating within like a 2-3 hour window before bed, it's gonna affect their sleep. They're gonna have more sleep disturbances, which is kind of when your body's tossing and turning. That's something that Whoop also measures. Blue light. So this is a good one. The light effectively that's emitting from your laptop, from your iPhone, that people are quite attached to. If you're looking at your phone up until the second before you go to sleep, that blue light is triggering your mind to want to stay awake. And so one great thing you can do is either not be using screen devices leading up to bed, or you can wear blue light blocking glasses. I'm still a hard driving entrepreneur. I'm building a business. It's hard for me to not look at my phone, frankly, hours going before bed. So I wear blue light blocking glasses, which are like these red tinted glasses. And it's effectively a get out of jail free card for looking at my phone, looking at a television, looking at a laptop screen.
Is there a
Another thing that you may want to.
I just want to stop you real quick for one sec. The blue light blocking glasses is something that I've been doing for a while. Is there a brand? I know that, you know, you're probably not affiliated with any brands, but like, is there a brand that you could suggest that you like using for that?
I've gone, I've cycled between a few different brands, and I wouldn't say I'm convinced yet of which is the best one. So I'm not gonna endorse a product yet in that category.
Gotcha. I think Whoop
But
should
but
make some blue
I
light
do
blocking
recommend
glasses.
that might be on our horizon. We'll see.
I like it.
The yeah, so then another category is around just the room that you're sleeping in. Colder is much better. Most people are sleeping in a room that's too warm. I like my bedroom to be about 65 degrees Fahrenheit. My wife doesn't quite love that, but we've both learned that we sleep much better in a cold bedroom. You want it to be as dark as possible. I wear an eye mask. If you're someone who travels a lot, or at least used to travel a lot, sleeping in different hotel rooms and all sorts of things, I think an eye mask can make a big difference. And then, air quality can be a thing. So if you've got dust, the folks who were experiencing all those fires, unfortunately in California, right? We saw disruptions to their sleep in Whoop data because the air quality was worse. So that's another thing to keep an eye out for is the air quality good in your bedroom? And then on the more personal side, it's worth seeing if there are certain supplements that if you take before bed can improve your sleep. I've come to realize that a heavy dose of magnesium makes me sleep better. And then I would say about 50% of the time, I'm taking a little bit of melatonin before bed. Melatonin is good at helping you fall asleep. So, this idea of sleep latency, how long does it take for you to fall asleep? It's another thing that Whoop measures. You want that to be as short as possible. And I find that there's some nights my mind's a little bit awake, or again, back to traveling. If you're traveling and you're on slightly the wrong time zone, I've found, at least for me personally, this is more of a personal thing, that melatonin can help me fall asleep.
I'm so happy that you went through that list because I'm pretty much there with everything that you just mentioned. I wish I was able to determine which was more impactful for me. I've seen my REM go up. I mean, my REM sleep is anywhere from 25 to 32% most nights.
Right.
I'm very excited to learn that slow wave sleep, though, is really what I should be focusing on, because I'm definitely trying to put on muscle and I don't pay enough attention to the slow wave. Is there anything that one would be able to do to impact slow versus REM?
These are like life's most important questions, and we're just on the cusp of being able to answer them. I mean, it's amazing how long humans have spent sleeping, and it's like a third of their lives.
Yeah.
And yet we've known so little about it. I mean, it's fascinating.
I just want to say that I like it is so fascinating for me. I mean, I could wake up in the morning. So I tend to go to bed at the exact same time and wake up at the exact same time every day. I don't wake up on an alarm. It's just like I've sort of, tuned my body to it. And there are things that could happen throughout my day that absolutely impact my HRV. And I want to talk about HRV as well. But it's so interesting that I can know immediately whether I'm going to be in the red, yellow, or green based on how I feel. And most of the time I get a fair amount of sleep, but for whatever reason, especially if I don't get enough sleep, it completely, and it could be a bit of a placebo at this point, just because I know, I know how important it is for me, but it completely, I'm not running on all cylinders. I am not optimized at all. And I will say that before I became a massive fan of Whoop, I did not pay as much attention to it. And I probably just plowed through the day and didn't really think about it much. But Whoop has forced me to want to optimize my sleep so much. And I've seen such a huge difference in my life, and specifically because I have Lyme's disease. chronic Lyme disease. I've had Lyme disease for a long time. I
It's
didn't
hard.
know. Yeah, I didn't know that I had it for such a long time until somewhat recently. But I will say that Lyme disease is one of those pain. It's like it's a real nightmare if you don't like do all the things that Whoop has taught me to do, which is really optimize my sleep and prioritize recovery. So
I mean, on that point, one thing I say all the time is that you can only manage what you measure. Right? You're a hard driving guy. All of a sudden, you've got some numbers against what you can improve. It follows that now you're going to make some behavior change to address those things. And I would say maybe the single thing I'm most proud of about Whoop is that if you look at Whoop members who have been on Whoop for a year, they are consistently changing behavior and improving health. Again, first month versus 12th month, lower resting heart rate, higher heart rate variability, sleeping more consistently, and getting a higher quality of sleep. So I think that's the hardest thing to do in this space, is to actually get people to change behavior and improve health. I think it's also the most profound thing. And a lot of it comes back to, are you collecting data that's accurate? And then are you telling people what to do with that data, right? Are you helping them understand it? And so those are just, those are things that we really focus on.
I cut you off when you were talking to us about your habits, the things that you do, and I want to go back there, but I also want to get back to HRV because I think it's very important. So you wake up typically at the same time every day, when life isn't completely chaotic, which I imagine is pretty chaotic for you with $1 billion company. You take a freezing cold shower. Do you spend a certain amount of time in the freezing cold shower?
Probably 3 to 5 minute shower. And to be fair, I'll start a little warm, kind of get in there, get comfortable, and then I'll go cold for the rest of it.
And do you go like full head underneath, or is it like you start with it on your back and then, because I do the cold shower thing too. I'm trying to give people some stuff to really take with them. Do you start with it on your back and then turn your body slowly, or how does it work for you?
I start with it on my face. Yeah. It's full submersion. I mean,
Right.
I've come to really embrace the cold. I think it's I subscribe to the belief that it can give you more energy. It can help sharpen you a little mentally. And there's just the things that you can do in life that give you a natural feeling of euphoria or happiness. You got to keep going back to those things. You know what I mean? And everyone's had that feeling where they get out of the cold and it's like that excited rush that you get. And yeah, I think we as humans should seek those sort of feelings out, and again, they're natural things. So keep doing them.
All right. So then when you're done with your shower, you meditate for 22 minutes. Why 22 minutes? And do you use a specific format, or do you use an app that you like to use while meditating?
So I started meditating in 2014. I had kind of come to a breaking point as an entrepreneur or founder. I felt like I wasn't doing a good job running Whoop. I had raised millions of dollars. I felt like the business wasn't where it needed to be. And I was kind of in a place of defeat, panic. And so I felt like I needed to do something to be able to kind of recenter. And I took this transcendental meditation course, which was a 4-day course. And I learned how to do transcendental meditation. Transcendental meditation, for people not familiar, is mantra based. So you have a mantra. The first 30 seconds, you kind of get into the meditation. You're just sort of sitting there, eyes closed, breathing, and then you start repeating this mantra in your mind. And it's a good focusing practice as well, because you have to focus on repeating this mantra. And what happens is you'll be repeating the mantra, and then you'll realize that thoughts are drifting into your mind. And as you get more practiced at meditating, you learn that you can either pay attention to those thoughts, so you can kind of like pause and actually absorb the thought and analyze it, or you can kind of just push it along by going back to repeating that mantra. And so what this does is it helps you form sort of a third person view of your thoughts and your mind. And I would say a younger version of me, or at least at the time when I first learned meditation, I felt like I was just reacting. And I'm sure everyone's experienced this at some point in their life. But the thing that just came out of your mouth, you didn't even realize you were going to say it, or you're angry at random times, or you don't feel like you're entirely in control of what you're doing. And what meditation did for me over months and really years is it helped me create an ability to look at myself in the third person, not just during the moment of meditating, but actually throughout my life. And so before I get angry, I'll hear a little voice in my head that's almost like, oh, Will's about to get angry. And it's this sort of amazing the best way I can describe it is a third person perspective that's helping you govern your life. And
that's come from the transcendental meditation for you?
It has. And that's not to say that it couldn't come from other forms of meditation. I think many forms of meditation are based on this principle that you learn how to control your breathing and you learn how to have some control of your thoughts. And it's also what's really hard about meditating. And I've experimented now with a lot of different forms of breathing. I think breathing is one of the forgotten techniques in overall health and well-being. I think if you can master your breathing, you can really, really improve your life. And that's in part why I got interested in the cold. What happens when you do cold plunges or you take cold showers is you realize when you don't breathe properly, the pain that comes with being in that cold is excruciating. If you watch someone who's never experienced how to handle the cold, excuse me, I've got a Slack call. Let's turn this off. 1 second here. Put this. If you watch someone experience the cold, who's never experienced the cold before, what's the first thing that happens? They go.
Wait, Will, hold on 1 sec. These guys are just making so much noise. Give me just 1 sec while I just tell them. 1 sec. Hey guys. Hey, I'm sorry, man. I gotta ask you to just take a break just because I'm on this interview and the noise is just way too loud. If you guys can just take a break for a half an hour, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So the cold.
Okay. So if you watch someone who goes in the cold for the first time and they're not ready for it, what happens, right? They immediately start like they have that like kind of hyperventilating moment, and you can tell that it's just insufferable, right? And so what you learn in part to overcome the cold is you have to be breathing really deeply and expanding your diaphragm and whatever. So I think learning how to control your breath can train your body to overcome stress, but it can help you overcome a lot.
I agree. The cold has been monumental for me. I absolutely love the cold. I actually took a chest freezer and turned it into my cold plunge in my garage gym. And it's just been, it's like a massive love-hate relationship. Hate right before I do it. Love, like once I get past the minute and a half where the pain in my toes, I don't really struggle with the breathing anymore, but I do struggle with like the pain in my toes and my fingers. And then you get past that about minute and a half, and then it's like blissful. And I could sit in there for, I don't know, 7 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes. And I walk out, and like you said, that unbelievable rush of like euphoria is unmatched, really, naturally anyway. So are there any other things that you do throughout the day? You know, I have some habits that I've started to, well, not started to, that I really hold close to, where I leave it the way I want to find it, right? And I've learned that that is something that has really helped with any sort with anxiety. Every time I leave a room, specifically working from home, every time I leave a room that I spend a fair amount of time in, I make sure that I leave it exactly how I'd like to find it. So when I'm in my home gym, you know, I put everything back to where it was, or where it's supposed to be. When I leave my home office, you know, my desk is absolutely clean and spotless, and, you know, things are exactly where I'd like to find them. And I've learned that that's been such an impactful habit that I've put into play, that's changed the game for me. Are there any things like that that you've done, or that you do that you can share with us?
Yeah, it's interesting. For a while, I read, all these different habits that top, high performing execs have about, oh, I want to do this type of work in the beginning of the day and this type of work later in the day. And I just came to realize that you need to be able to handle the chaos of whatever comes at you if you're going to be running a very complicated um, business. And so for me, it's more about habits related to being in the moment, um, and sort of like a general disposition. When I was younger, for example, I drank too much caffeine. And so I realized that depending on what time of day I was in a meeting, I might actually be behaving a little differently. Like, if I was the first meeting on the calendar, I would be asking a lot of questions and sort of like a little jumpy almost, whereas if it was later in the afternoon, maybe I was like a slightly different, had like a slightly different disposition, or I was more focused at certain hours or less focused at other hours. And really what I've tried to do is just create a mindset of consistency where where I'm kind of I'm just level, right? And for a long period of time, and a lot of that comes back to being able to try to stay very present. I think we have a lot of devices on us. I think we have a lot of little notifications and things. That actually goes back to one thing I would recommend people do is spend some time getting a hold of their phone. From like I have some interesting settings on my phone, but a lot of it comes back to not having a million push notifications and whatnot. I've turned off
What are the
notifications.
what are the settings on your phone?
Well, I've turned off notifications for virtually every single app. So, I don't have these little badges appearing all over my screen. You look at most people's phones, they have like a million of these little badges, and you might look over their shoulder and you see three things coming down from the top of the screen while they're looking at their phone. And again, I mean, this was my life previously, but you just learn that that's actually not productive at all. Your phone is not designed to manage you. You should be managing your phone. So you want to turn a lot of that shit off. And so if you want to be looking at your email, you go into your email with intention to look at your email. And so those are those are just some things I guess that come to mind. But really, I would say most of it's a framework of believing that at any point in the day I can execute at a high level, and trying to have a very kind of balanced attitude throughout the day.
Um, I've got a few other questions that are important, really important for someone like you, because you are, when someone would look at you, or when someone would go onto your LinkedIn profile, they would say, "Oh my gosh, this guy is like incredibly successful." And for you, I would love for you to answer what success means to you, actually.
So there's a lot of different ways to think about what is success. One healthy framework for becoming a successful entrepreneur is that success is overcoming a level of stress that would break most people. I'll say that again. Success is overcoming a level of stress that would break most people. And what's powerful about that is there's two layers to it. The obvious layer is that you need to overcome stress in order to be successful. The more subtle nuance there is that you actually have to overcome an enormous amount of stress, right? It needs to be a level of stress that would break most people. And that as a framework is a really powerful framework for when you feel like you're getting hit in the face or punched in the face in what you're building or trying to create, right? Because if you say to yourself, okay, well, this is the moment I need to really step up. The business is running out of cash, or, the product's not working, or if other people face this, this might be the thing that they couldn't get past. I'm going to figure out a way to get past that. So that is sort of a disposition towards being a successful entrepreneur. I think is pretty healthy. I think you have to be careful. You have to be careful that with the impact or the success, as I've just defined it, you also find a level of gratitude, happiness in your life. I think that it's easy for people like us to end up on a dopamine wheel. Dopamine wheel is like you keep telling yourself when you get to that next milestone, you're going to have all this happiness. And so, in fact, just thinking about getting to that milestone gives you the dopamine to get to that milestone. But what you've done is you've overweighted the value of getting to that milestone. And so now when you get there, there's a letdown. This is how even successful entrepreneurs burn out, is they overweight what getting to that milestone will be, and they don't appreciate it in the process. So what's critical is to balance that dopamine cycle with serotonin, which is another chemical that makes you happy. Serotonin is produced when your body or your mind, when you're experiencing gratitude. And so that's been another area that I've really worked on in the past few years, which is appreciating the moment that you're in, appreciating the brilliant people that you work with or get to meet. I'm grateful to be having this conversation with you, Michael, right? And even saying that makes me happy. So, that's the risk for entrepreneurs, hard driving entrepreneurs, is that they get stuck on dopamine and they're not grateful. And I'll just say that I think a more naive version of myself would have thought of gratitude and complacency as falling in the same bucket. And they're actually two very different things. Gratitude's recognizing appreciation for things that are happening in your life. And it could be as simple as, the taste of this water right now, right? And just having access to water, like whatever. I'm just looking at my bottle on my desk. Complacency is saying that everything I've done is enough. And those are different things. And so I would just encourage people to try to find gratitude in their life if they do find themselves caught on that dopamine wheel.
It's so interesting that you bring up gratitude, because one of the questions I have listed down here was to ask you to tell us a few things that you're grateful for. Because I agree with you wholeheartedly. And this time in in the last 11 months of life, I've really been able to focus on the things that I'm grateful for more so than ever before. I'm married with children, and the ability to spend time with my kids and genuinely appreciate my son's smile, both of them, like the difference between appreciating the smile now and appreciating the smile, or being grateful for the smile before this time, was enormous, because it was something that was passing by, and now I can actually consume it and embrace it and genuinely be with it. So what are a few things that you're grateful for?
Let's see. I mean, part of the magic of actually buying into this notion of gratitude is that you then start to be grateful for a lot of really little things in your life too, which I think is a pretty healthy habit. But I mean, the big things that I'm grateful for, I you know, I have an incredibly loving wife who I've been with for a long time, and who's an amazing support system for me. I'm incredibly grateful to have been able to build this business Whoop, which is I just get to work with such incredibly talented people. It's surreal, and I'm also incredibly grateful for the people who use Whoop, because they often will send me stories of how the products improved their life, and that is really heartwarming, and makes me incredibly proud. I think I'm also grateful to be living at this moment in time. I think this is a really interesting time to be alive in the world, and so I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for a lot of things that, you know, might seem small. I had an amazing cup of coffee this morning, you know, and I think again, you have to train yourself to do this, but the more you start saying things like that, it actually makes you happier.
I could not agree with you more. You know, I feel like that's such a strong way to end this podcast with you, but I do want to ask you just a few more questions that, and I might actually edit it to finish with that, because I feel like that is such a powerful way to end, because I know in my heart of hearts that success is not about accomplishment and capital. That's a piece of what could make up a successful story. But I do genuinely believe that happiness is an inside job, and happiness trumps success, or what we think of success, all day long. And it has a lot to do with giving yourself time to smell the roses. You know, I do something called the stop smile, which is a little sort of like you know, as an entrepreneur, you said it so eloquently and so articulately, like, you know, success as an entrepreneur is the ability to overcome an enormous amount of stress. And that's so true, because there's nothing but that in the life of an entrepreneur, specifically when you're building something that others look at as a successful business. But the ability to stop and tap into the serotonin is something that I've started to do. And what I basically do is, if I'm feeling overwhelmed, which happens often, I literally stop, I close my eyes, and I smile from ear to ear for about 15 seconds. The S is for smile, the T is for the T is for transition. So basically, when I'm closing my eyes, I'm smiling. I'm literally transitioning from overwhelmed stress to patience, and having patience with myself. And then I go to the O, which is observe it. And then I take another deep breath, and then I proceed. And like that takes me no time to do, but it's a little system that I've created that has genuinely been able to allow me to tap into serotonin when I need it, because when we smile, our body produces it. And so it's so, I know that gratitude is a much bigger part of success than creating $1 billion business, which is what you've done. And not many people can say that. And so I'm so grateful that you are on here saying that, because it's so fucking important for people to understand that is a much bigger part of life. You can live a life with all sorts of external things and a bunch of accomplishments, and look in the mirror and hate yourself. Actually hate yourself, and not tell anybody, you know, and play and live in a persona that, you know, when people ask you how you're doing, you just say, oh, I'm great. Look at all the things. I'm great. People expect you to say that. I'm great. And, you know, I think this time has been polarizing for a lot of people, but the ability to actually say, you know what, like, I'm going to give myself a break, and I'm not going to beat myself up for not accomplishing everything that I want to accomplish today. I just want to talk about HRV because I think HRV is really, really important. It's basically what what Whoop is built upon. Can you just explain what HRV is?
Yeah, HRV stands for heart rate variability. Heart rate variability is the amount of time in between successive beats of the heart. So it's a little counterintuitive, but if your heart's beating at 60 beats per minute, it's not beating every second. It might be beating at 1.2 seconds, and then 0.8 seconds, and then 0.7 seconds, and then 1.3 seconds, right? So there's a variability even in the amount of time between beats of the heart. And this is also counterintuitive, but the more variability, the healthier you are, right? So it's actually a sign that your body is adapting to its environment. And heart rate variability is a direct measurement of your autonomic nervous system. Your autonomic nervous system consists of sympathetic and parasympathetic activity. So sympathetic is activation. It's heart rate up, blood pressure up, respiration up. When you inhale, that's sympathetic, okay? Parasympathetic's all the opposite. Heart rate down, blood pressure down, respiration down. It's what helps you fall asleep. So when you exhale, that's parasympathetic. And as it turns out, you want for every sympathetic for there to be a parasympathetic response. That's a sign that your body's in balance. And that balance comes through in a high heart rate variability. It's why people also who meditate or really practice breathing may have higher heart rate variabilities. So we measure heart rate variability 24/7 with Whoop. It's one of the kind of the single breakthroughs that we've had as a company, or one of maybe many breakthroughs, but and a very important one. We measure heart rate variability as accurately as an electrocardiogram. So when I was in college studying heart rate variability, it was being used in the 80s by power lifters to determine Olympic power lifters to determine if they should lift heavy weights or not lift weights at all. It's been used by the CIA in lie detection tests. It's been used by cardiologists and doctors to predict heart attacks, heart failures. And the challenge for heart rate variability, at least in decades past, is the method for collecting heart rate variability often required the electrocardiogram, right? So this big, expensive medical equipment, right, that you see in hospitals, or if you're watching a movie, it's the machine that's like beep, 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 like the
EKG.
in a scene, the EKG, right? In the scene where someone's dying in a movie. So heart rate variability is this really important statistic, and we measure it all the time, but in particular, we measure it every single night during the last 5 minutes of your body's slow wave sleep. And what's important about that is slow wave sleep, as we discussed, is when your body's repairing itself. And measuring heart rate variability every night during the same period allows you to create a control. And a control, therefore, allows you to compare the statistic night over night. So we look at your heart rate variability over 3 days, 7 days, and 30-day moving averages to determine how well repaired, how well restored is your body when you wake up in the morning.
I unfortunately suffer in the HRV department. I'm never super duper high in HRV. If I take a full weeks off of training, my HRV tends to be much higher. I train pretty hard as a pro athlete, so my HRV suffers. However, I do know other guys that are, younger than me, that have heart rate variability in like the high 100, like 180 to 220s. I want to ask you, if you were to say, what is, if there's 3 things for people that, and I'm sure there's lots of people that wear Whoop that listen to this podcast. If there are 3 things for me and everyone else to try to pump that HRV up, what are they?
Yeah, a lot of it. Well, it really is a very all-encompassing statistic. So it's a very hard thing to say a blanket for everyone. Okay. But let's try. Um, First of all, is getting control of your sleep, right? That's when your body's actually repairing and recovering. So if you've got a good environment for sleeping, if you're sleeping consistently, that's one of the single biggest unlocks. Sleep consistently. Um, and also your mindset, going to bed, how you feel, like what you're thinking about. I mean, you could do everything perfectly. You could eat all the right things, you could take all the right supplements, you could have trained the right amount today, and you get in a big fight with your partner, your spouse, whatever, and I guarantee you your heart rate variability is not going to be good the next day, and your body's going to be a little out of whack. So there's a mindset thing here too that's happening. So I think sleep is one. I think just generally controlling your breath and the way you're adapting to your environment, so your psychological mindset, I think is so important. And then if we're going to just grab a bunch of things and put them in one bucket, I would say the diet, the substances, those need to be right for you. Now, let's be specific to you, Michael. You actually may be suppressing your heart rate variability because you're striving to have such a low percent body fat. That low percent body fat may actually put more of a burden on your heart rate variability, right? That's possible, because I know when you told me you were training, you'd get down to 4% or less, right? You get really low, right?
Yeah,
So
I mean,
that's one.
I'd put on since my last competition, I've put on 20 pounds. However, my body fat percentage has stayed below 10%, not intentionally. That's just how my body is taking on the stuff. So I don't know if that impacts it.
Well,
But
10%, the 10% maybe fine. But I remember you telling me you're kind of like in the single digits or below. I
yeah,
was thinking, well, that could be one thing that might be affecting your heart rate variability. Another, is diet. I mean, this is a big one that we work with athletes on, like making sure that they're eating the right thing for them. The problem with diet, though, from a podcast standpoint, is it's so personalized. It's very hard for me to tell any listeners what's right for them without them starting to measure their bodies.
yeah.
But it's highly personalized. Alcohol tends to be bad, things like that.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for joining me on this podcast today. Really, this has been one of the most interesting podcasts I've done. I'm super inspired and feel completely fulfilled from this interview. I always ask the question at the end of the podcast: do you think you were born or made?
I'll go with made. I mean, I think the theme of growing into an entrepreneur was learning how to be one and adapting to it. And so I think made. And the only thing I'll say is that I also have to give a lot of credit to my parents, because the way my parents raised me, I think, also shaped me in a lot of ways. So to the extent that born at all involves parenting, I also have to say it's born, but a lot of that was how it shaped me as well.
Well, I'm gonna want to get that story, so there might be a part two to this saga here. I wish you all the best in everything that you do. You inspire so many people, and you've done something that's really changed a lot of people's lives. And I know that you're going to continue doing it and paving the path for folks like me and many others. So it's awesome to have you on, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Michael, and grateful to have you on Whoop as well.
Awesome, man. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, Will.
Okay. And you want me to save this audio file and send it to you?
Yeah. You can just send that to me, email that to me, and we'll have it for the post.
Oh shit. So here's the thing. It looks like it stopped recording at 42 minutes.
That's all right. Don't worry about it. I'm sure Joel will be able to he'll be able to work with what we've got, because it didn't seem like there was any glitches in the internet.
So you don't need it.
Yeah, this Zoom is really clean, so we're fine.
Okay,
Awesome.
good. Thanks, guys.
You're the man, Will. Thank you so much, brother.
All right. See you.
Later. That was so good.